Hey everyone, Poindexter here, and we continue our playthrough of the solitaire wargame Western Front Ace. Our French pilot was promoted to captain during the last two patrols, but was overpowered in a dogfight with an albatross, suffering a serious wound and unable to fly for a month. However, the first patrol after his return saw him down a German two-seater in friendly territory, which gave him his 17th victory. So, let's continue Captain Daladier's career as we play out the final month of 1917. Albert's next mission will be a line patrol. Albert and his wingman will fly to the front lines and patrol the area, engaging any enemy aircraft they encounter. Albert takes off, and we check for our first encounter. And a flight of enemy two-seaters is spotted nearby. The two-seaters are Roland C2s. Applying a -1 modifier to the orientation roll, thanks to Albert's situational awareness skill, we begin combat with the advantage. Albert attacks the Roland and calls on his wingman to help. Albert fires and finds that his guns are jammed. The weapon maintenance skill overrides the jam, however, and Albert scores 5 potential hits. The two-seater performs a side loop, improving his position by 1. The Roland's rear gunner takes his shot at the Spad and manages to land 3 hits. But all 3 hits have no effect, only striking canvas and a non-existent rear gunner. We apply Albert's 5 hits to the Roland. 3 hits have no effect, but the remaining 2 hits are critical, knocking out the rear guns and damaging the engine. Albert's wingman now fires at the two-seater and scores 4 more hits, but is damaged in the process. His attack damages the starboard struts and severely damages the tail. The Roland performs his side loop, and the 2 aircraft are now head-on. We determine final positions in the initiative check, applying a -2 to the Roland's initiative due to the damaged engine, and we add +1 to the Spad because of situational awareness. And even with the poor results, Albert easily manages to gain 2 positions and is now on the Roland's tail. 1 hit is all that's needed to bring the two-seater down, so Albert will use reflexes to fire first in this round of combat. He fires, and Albert is robbed of his kill as his guns jam again. The Roland goes defensive and pulls a tight turn, improving his position by 1. The Roland's rear guns have been knocked out, so there is no defensive fire. We now determine final positions, and Albert easily manages to get on the two-seater's tail once again. Albert attempts to unjam his guns, and it's no use. The guns are permanently inoperative and cannot fire. The Roland goes defensive and performs a split S, avoiding 1 hit and ending the encounter. Furious at what has just happened, Albert circles back to the airfield and attempts to land. We check the weather over the field, and the weather has turned bad, adding a +2 to the landing roll, but we remove 1 point since Albert has the landing skill. We roll a modified 10, which is a safe landing. Though Albert didn't make it to the front, the mission is a success since she engaged in combat, and we document Albert's patrol in the pilot log. Albert's next patrol will be a bomber escort, requiring us to fly to enemy territory and back. Again, we can only engage enemy scouts, as tangling with two-seaters is forbidden. Albert and his wingman take off, and both pilots search for enemy aircraft. but no aircraft are spotted. The group flies into friendly territory, and we check the sky once again. But no enemy aircraft are seen. The flight moves into no man's land, and Albert checks for enemy aircraft sightings. And German scouts are spotted in the area. The scouts are Albatross D3s. And with Albert's situational awareness, he manages to gain the advantage over the Albatross. Albert fires at the German scout and lands 2 possible hits, with a bonus hit to a crew member. But the sharp German pilot pulls an Immelman, avoiding all damage and quickly gaining the advantage over Albert. We determine the final positions in the initiative check. And both scouts tie at 18, which means no position shift. Albert decides to use all his tricks to get out of this predicament. He'll perform his advanced maneuver, the Cuban 8, and use reflexes to gain a position at the end of the next initiative check. The Albatross fires and scores 5 hits, but we remove 1 hit thanks to our Cuban 8 maneuver. And other than wrecking the Spad's landing gear, no critical damage was caused. Albert's Cuban 8 brings him head-on with the Albatross. We now determine the final positions. And both aircraft would have remained head-on, but thanks to Albert's reflexes, we shift 1 position, and Albert now has the advantage over the Albatross. With no skills left to use, it's now a straight-up fight with this German pilot. Albert fires and potentially scores 5 hits, plus a bonus hit to a crew member. But the Albatross goes evasive and avoids all damage. We now check the final positions, and thanks to Albert's situational awareness, the +1 added to the final total gives Albert a 3-point advantage, which is enough for another position shift, and he is now on the Albatross's tail. Albert lines up on the German scout and fires, and scores 3 possible hits. But the Albatross quickly turns the tables on the Spad, performing a half loop, which places him on Albert's tail. We assign the 3 hits to the Albatross, and the Albatross struts and landing gear are hit, but no critical damage is caused. We now determine final positions, and it's not enough. The Albatross remains firmly on Albert's tail. Albert cannot leave his vulnerable tail to the mercy of the Albatross, so he will attempt a tight turn and try to re-engage. The Albatross fires and lands 4 hits, plus a possible crew member hit. Both struts are hit along with the fuel tank, which is now leaking. The hit to a crew member does not take place, since we rolled for a non-existent observer. Albert's tight turn gains him 1 position shift, and we now determine final positions. And Albert's situational awareness saves him again, giving him just enough points to gain another position, and both scouts are now head-on. It's do or die time. Albert will fire an extended burst at the Albatross. He lets loose on the German scout and scores 5 possible hits. The extended burst adds 2 more hits, but causes a weapons jam. But the weapons maintenance overrides that outcome, and the hits are applied. We assign the 7 hits. The Albatross takes critical damage to her port struts. Fuel tank is hit, and the pilot suffers a light wound, but it's still not enough to bring down the German scout. Now the Albatross gets his chance to attack. He fires and scores 5 hits. And Albert takes a critical hit to the engine, and the port struts are near collapse. We now determine final positions. With a light wound, we apply a -1 modifier to the Albatross's final initiative, and we apply a -2 modifier to the SPAD due to engine damage. And Albert finally receives a miracle. With the superior initiative roll, he gains 2 positions and is now on the Albatross's tail. Albert will tempt fate no longer, deciding to take advantage of his superior position and end the encounter. Albert races back to friendly territory. With a leaking fuel tank, we burn 2 endurance spaces instead of 1. We check for further encounters, and thankfully, no enemy aircraft are seen. Albert makes his way to the airfield, and we check for our final encounter. And mercifully, no other aircraft are spotted. Albert begins his landing, and we check the weather. And the weather is good. We apply a +2 modifier to the landing since the SPAD's landing gear is destroyed, but we remove 1 point because of Albert's landing skill. And despite the damage, Albert makes a smooth landing. Albert's SPAD is a complete wreck. With 9 hits, his trusty fighter is written off. He will receive a replacement in time for the next patrol. We document Albert's memorable patrol in the pilot log, and Albert is off to the escadrille's mess hall to calm his nerves with the largest bottle of wine he could find. And with these 2 patrols completed, it has become clear to Captain Daladier that he has transferred to an area that contains some of the best pilots Germany has. It is clearly going to be a battle of skills along this area of the front lines. And skills are what has given Albert a lease on life, managing, however small the amount, to give him just enough of an edge to make it home again. His skills don't grant immortality, but they do give him at least a fighting chance. And, as was seen during the dogfight with the last Albatross, a chance is sometimes all that's needed to fight another day. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next patrol.